Welcome to East by West Farms. Here we grow what we eat and eat what we grow. Today I'm going to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of growing things in the greenhouse at the end of April. In our previous video, we talked about growing inside the greenhouse have a lot of advantage. And of course, that is when the weather is cold. When the weather starts to warm up, there are actually, inside the greenhouse, there are a few things that you have to be careful about. We're at the end of April. Usually around this time, Texas weather would be warmed up quite nicely. We probably would have taken the cover of the greenhouse off. But this year, things are a little bit crazy, and we actually get some kind of near freezing in April. Even now, next week, we're going to have a cold front come, and that drop the low temperature to in the 50s. Hopefully in 2 weeks, we should be able to take the cover of the greenhouse off. First, I'm going to talk about the advantages of still using a greenhouse still in April. What you see here is these peach cuttings that I grow from cutting. You can see they have leaves, but not very vigorously, and these leaves are more tender. I took them out. I think that they can get some rain and dew and sunlight that maybe help them to get more strength. But it turns out that actually they were not happy at all outside. The wind around this time is very strong, and I see just after 1 or 2 days, I see some damage. Could be the sun is too strong. So I brought them in, and they seem to be much better. So seems to be around this time for the greenhouse, the main thing is for cuttings is really of great advantage. The same thing with the Yupan hollies. When I put them out, they get dried up. But when they stay inside, they seem to be all right. The second advantages of using a greenhouse in April is that you can use it to sprout the heat-loving plants. Over here, I have a Haiying bean, and that usually need the soil temperature to be quite warm. I think they need to get the temperature to consistently 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside of the greenhouse, I got one sprouted, so that gave me probably about 1 month of lead time in terms of sprouting Haiying beans. Over here is turmeric, just like ginger, that is also require consistent hot temperature, warm temperature to start to sprout out. And I got one sprouted out. That is definitely probably will not happen outside. Those are the two good things or advantages of growing things in the greenhouse in April. Next, I'm going to talk about the disadvantages of growing plants in the greenhouse in April. So you'll notice that the lighting over here is very different from outside. I have some water spinach sprouted from the previous year's roots. I was afraid that the cold front would kill them, so I dug up one and put it in the greenhouse. That one didn't grow as well as the ones that were growing outside. The main difference I see is probably because the light is not as strong. Even though the temperature here is probably more favorable for water spinach, but the lighting is not there, and it really didn't grow as well as the one that are outside. The third disadvantage is in the greenhouse is that it has much more pest pressure than outside. Outside, I haven't seen much damage from the grasshoppers. Over here, the grasshoppers are our biggest enemy. But inside, I see lots of baby grasshoppers that are hopping around. These elm cuttings that the new leaves get chewed up by the bugs pretty bad. I need to be more diligent and then get some neem oil and spray over here. I haven't needed to spray it outside yet. The last point that I want to talk about, is, which I didn't expect, is that in the greenhouse, at the daytime, when the sun is shining, the greenhouse heat up. But the greenhouse itself is not insulated, so it could lose the temperature quite quickly when the sun sets. The night temperature is pretty much the same as outside. For example, for ginger that require night temperature to be consistent above 70 degrees Fahrenheit to sprout, it doesn't have the full advantage of, say, insulated greenhouse because the night temperature still drops. I suspect that was the same case for the sweet potatoes. I put some sweet potato in the ground over here. Some rotted because of the high humidity. Some just start to sprout. In contrast, I put some sweet potato outside, directly just outside, and I got the slips already, even though the air temperature gets heat up, but the ground temperature somehow didn't. It's kind of unexpected to me because I was expecting the sweet potato in the greenhouse will sprout much earlier than the one outside. The question is the pros outweigh the cons? That's a difficult question to answer. For lots of these disadvantages, maybe you can overcome that. For example, you can choose the plants, the shade-loving plants, or the plants that are not so sensitive to night temperature. But the biggest problem to me is the pest. The pest they chewed up quite a lot of things. Probably I will take the greenhouse, the cover off when the weather warms, just to kind of reduce the pest pressure. And then if I have plants that need protection, like the cuttings, I might put some kind of local protection, like shade cloths, to protect the cuttings, but the whole greenhouse would open. That make managing the moisture and the pest much easier. In this video, I talked about the advantages and the disadvantages of planting inside a greenhouse in April, which is kind of at the borderline between cold weather and warm weather. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumb up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below. If you have not done so, please hit the subscribe button to follow our journey with the East by West Farms.